I'm going to be reading to you a poem today titled A Lesson in Uprooting, and it's a poem that I wrote in 2018, and it was published in 2018 on the online magazine Umble and Panicle for their seventh issue on the theme of roots. And if you would like to read the text version, you can find all the links to like all my online stuff on my website, www.bydhiyanah.com. That's BYDHIYANAH. And if you enjoy my work and if you want to see more of it, or if you want to be part of it, you can please consider joining my Patreon. And that is at www.patreon.com/bydhiyanah. The links are all on my website, so that's like the main place to go if you want to know what I'm up to. So okay, now that that's out of the way, let's go to this. Let's head into this poem. So this poem came to me in fragments before I knew that it was a poem. Once in a while, I will get really like motivated to write down like the random bits of inspiration that comes through. I feel like I should be doing this a lot more than I actually do it, because like as a creative person, an artist, a writer, like I keep a billion sketchbook at once now, and I feel like when it comes to writing though, like it's so tempting for me to just like leave it all steeping in my head. And I know that I usually get so overwhelmed by all the stuff in here that it rarely ever actually comes out like in writing until I create like some kind of project or an idea, or until I give myself a deadline for something. It like rarely, not rarely, it sometimes just does not really come to fruition. It just kind of ends up like flickering off as inspiration tends to do sometimes when you don't act on it. So that's a lesson. Keeping to the theme of the poem titled A Lesson in Uprooting. Okay, so where was I? Right, so this poem came to me in fragments before I knew it was a poem, and it was a response to the strange dream that I had for a while. It was a dream that I had in like 2 nights, um, the exact same sensation, the exact same dream. And usually when that happens, I know that I'm going through something like some kind of deep healing or deep awakening work that's happening, and my body's feeling it. So with this dream, like I dreamt that my belly button was bleeding. And when I was awake, I could actually feel the soreness and that raw, it was almost like it felt like a bruise on that part of my body. And and I think around the same time as well, I developed a stress rash on my face, and I was scratching it without knowing, and it started bleeding. I had some kind of work going on around that time, because usually I'm really good at, even in 2018, like I started becoming really good at like, oh, my body's going through this, I need to like take care of myself. But I think I was like working or something, so I was really stressed out at that point. And I remember just like taking a tissue and just like placing it on where the stress rash was bleeding, and just leaving it there and forgetting about it for a while. And then when I realized, there's like piece of tissue on my face, I took it out, and it was like this is like constellation of red splotches that kind of, for whatever reason, that was what I needed to like finish writing this poem. um, but the poem fully finalized. I finalized the poem when I saw the call for submission for Umble and Panicle that they put out for their issue 7 theme of roots. I was like, I saw the theme, and I was like, this is so close to my heart that I'm like, well, let's see if I can make something for it. Like it'd be a good like creative thing to do, you know. And it could also be like with all the stuff that was happening in my body and with my dreams, and internally I felt like it could have been like a nice way to like it would have been like a healing experience, a cathartic experience, to put it into words and create something creative and poetic out of it. And that's what I did, and that's how this poem was born. um, yeah. Um, I wanted to talk about uprooting for a little bit as well. I remember that was what kind of led me to wanted to share this right now, because working with like the themes of seeds and boundaries, and knowing that that's seeds and growing and learning how to do boundary work. It's like all of that you can kind of see that happening in nature in real time if you really like kind of slow down, like take a walk in nature and slow down and notice these things. You can really see these happening. A lot of things that happen in nature involves breakage, rupture, and death and decay. And I think it was just a few days ago that I said, um, I said, Mother Nature does not shy away from decay. We all know this about her. And it was kind of really resonant with with what I'm going through right now, which has a lot to do with like feeling a slight sense of uprootingness in terms of like how I'm moving from one. I feel like I'm moving from one timeline to another, or that I'm being placed in between two timelines specifically to observe the difference and the contrast between them. And it feels very much like being on the threshold of life and death, which I have been in quite literally uh, more times than I can count. I was born, I had one of those lives. I have one of those lives this lifetime right now. One of those lives where I have like, mm, where it's, let's just say, it's a challenge to stay in the body. Or it has been such a challenge to stay in the human body because when I was born, my consciousness was really aware of its non-human aspects. It's more like light being aspect, its spirit aspect. It was super aware of that, and it wasn't super aware of the body aspect, of the human aspect. So then figuring out how to like merge these two things has been like, I guess, why I'm here, is to figure out how to do that, figure out how to be the bridge and how to like, for my consciousness and my awareness to be the bridge between um, these parts of me, and kind of learn how to accept that um, that threshold is there, but it's also like not like learning how to accept to see it as one rather than like separate. And I feel like this poem captures a lot of that, and it captures a lot of it in a way that I didn't know it was going to capture it. Like now that I'm reading it as me in 2020, like it's so different than the feeling and the energies that I get from it when I was writing it, which was like from a place of grief. And now I'm reading it and it's from a place of moving through grief and knowing how to sit with grief. Like one of the things that is causing this slight uprooting feeling in me right now is my relationship with my wounds and my triggers is radically shifting. I no longer have a negative relationship with my triggers. And that is so huge that is causing some disorientation. And it's also just it's also reminding me as well of how much death and decay that I felt in internally when I was growing up and in the state of like victimhood and survivinghood. And now that I am moving away from it, that I'm growing away from it, it feels like all that stuff was composted. Like it's now fertilizer. It's now like it's now something that's feeding the soil that I get to like grow in and play in and become bigger in, like become more myself in. And there's a very, it's morbid, but it's also really beautiful. And I have no qualms about like mixing morbidity and beauty into one. I've learned how to do that as I learned how to do that as a coping mechanism when I was a teenager, and now like I use that as a way of practicing oneness. And yeah, I think I'm okay. So here is the poem, A Lesson in Uprooting. I trace a line from belly button downwards, where blood had trailed out non-stop for 2 nights, staining the sheets into a map of unmurring and unmothering, my fingers gritty and damp from salt water and sand. Here lies the deafening screams of a child lost, who in her second life found her voice on the floor of Charon's boat. I trailed the map's intentions across waters, swimming beyond the stretches of lung and limb, washing up onto a threshold unlike any other. A mountain, a tree, and the sea, arranging themselves to split light and dark, day and night, land and water, you and I, into an island the shape of our shadows. this place where everything in between held itself accountable to the drumming of the past's anxious hearts. Each breath a test of will against memory. Each breath a necessity for continuity, as the fire beneath the mountains surpassed itself. From history, the umbilical cord that held everything in place ripped apart the center point, an open wound that scars for generation. A separation, an eruption occurs in the time it takes to remember everything at once. In the debris of all the things that happened, I lay my head down to rest on the smoldering earth, still throbbing with ancestors. A shedding ritual. These old roots my shoulders carried for years sizzle heavily against the volcanic aftermath, frying into ash. On the other side of the story, palm fronds wave in the sky, beckoning the hot breath of madness to pass. Here lies the ending of a child, recurring again and again in the decay of her body, which for her final life she left behind to grow a tree. Thank you for listening.